All right, Matt Wilson, Commissioner of the IATF here again. We're going to do a follow-up video to our fundamentals of coaching, and we're going to talk a little bit here about troubleshooting some of the problems that we can find with a new thrower. The first one we're going to tackle is how to solve an over-rotating axe. So we call it over-rotation, and it's a little self-explanatory. We're talking about an axe that rotates past the point of blade impact on the wood and is making impact with the top of the axe or beyond so that it's not sticking. That is a key problem that we see. It's a common problem, and it's a pretty easy one to fix. It's one of the easier ones to solve. So let's talk about how we do that. First things first, you've done the fundamentals, so you've got them in the right position to start. And as we said in the fundamentals, we're only using the throwing line as a reference point. So we've got them in the right position, and the first thing that we're going to try and do is we want to close the distance with where they're releasing the axe and where the target is. And obviously the target's not going anywhere, so we got to get them to reach closer to the target by the time they let go of the axe. So the first step of coaching to give them is to just say, lean in more, follow through. And the follow-up to that is put all of your weight on your front foot. So really encourage them to push their weight forward. Sometimes you'll see people going back, and then when they come forward, they'll back up into their weight on the back foot, and that can cause a bit of a flick, bit of a snap, and create that over rotation. So reminding them, lean in, put all your weight on the front foot. Even don't be afraid if you lean in so much that your back foot comes off the ground. And that's the first thing that we want to work on to get them to get closer to the target and close that distance. I know some of you out there like to coach with a step. I strongly advise against that. I feel like coaching someone brand new and adding another body movement into the list of variables that can change from one throw to another creates more problems than it solves. So to me, that's a very advanced throw, and I would save that for advanced throwers only. I would not be coaching new throwers with a step. So I stay away from that. I recommend you do as well if you want high success rate without overcomplicating things. So yeah, lean in, follow through, put all your weight on that front foot, and I encourage them, don't be afraid to have the back foot come off the ground. And I will act it out just like that in between the lanes so they can visualize what's happening. That's the first thing to do to try and fix over rotation. The next thing to do to solve over rotation is to actually physically move them closer to the target on the floor. So again, we've set the stage by calling the throwing line a reference point. So this is to help dismantle some egos that might feel like they're cheating by getting closer to the target. I find that works really well to set the stage by telling them that at the very beginning, which we talked about in fundamentals. And so now it should be pretty easy to say, hey, listen, you're over rotating, we're leaning in and following through, and all of that motion is good. It's good to give them a little confidence by saying something like that to them and say, now though, we're just going to adjust your position on the floor a little bit. So in order to close the distance, and I will demonstrate these same things that I'm doing to the camera here for the guests. I'll say, you're over rotating. So we're just rotating a little too far. We want to close the distance from where you're releasing the axe to the target. So let's move you forward on the floor a little bit. And I'll stand here and I'll say, you know, your foot was here before. Why don't we get your lead foot up here now? Bring your toe up to my foot and get them to physically line up with me marking the spot that I want them to get to. And so that's how we bring them closer to the target, and then say it's important to then remind them to still do all the things they were doing before. So still lean in, still follow through, still put their weight on that front foot, but now we're closer to the target. So first one is lean in, follow through, weight on the front foot. Second one is actually physically move them closer with their position on the floor. Okay. And then the third step, and this is if someone's just flicking, they can't quite figure out how to stop from flicking the axe. You've brought them closer to the target and they're still over rotating. This is a very rare situation, but it does come up, and sometimes people's brain is not connecting well with their body. They're not as familiar with sort of their own space, and so they just can't stop with the flick. I'll encourage them to say, you know what, we normally wouldn't encourage this, but in this situation, try putting your thumb up on the handle of the axe. And this acts as a little bit of a handbrake of sorts to the speed of the rotation of the axe. So this will slow down that rotation, because as they're letting go, the thumb puts this last piece of contact that is kind of, you know, up higher on the handle and stalls the rotation a little bit. So that is the sort of last effort piece to try and solve an over rotating axe. All right, so we just did some throws with some over rotation and varying degrees of it, and I'm just going to talk you through the examples here. So we started with the most over rotating, and that's this one here, which you may not notice right away, but the way that this one hit is actually like this. So I can actually rest that in there. This is a down impact of that. So that's that one. Then we get into these couple. This one here is that, right? So that's the back of the head hitting and snapping up. This one is the same, but a little more on this angle and then snapping up. And these ones start to get more and more flat as I got a little bit closer. And I'm throwing the same all the time. I just got a little bit closer each time and threw exactly the same. And I got closer and closer. And then you can see this one here and this one here, where the axe is basically hitting flat like that. I don't know if you can tell here, but there's actually a divot right here as well from the top of this. So you can see that sits in there and it fits in perfectly there. These are the visuals that you can see on the target when you're trying to identify an over rotation. Okay, so right there, boom, 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 and then this one all the way around. Also boom.